Hi, everyone, and welcome to the December 20th, 2021 Long Meadow Select Board meeting. My name is Mark Strange, and I am the Select Board Chair. I'll be confirming that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Steve Morantz. Here. Josh Levine. Here. Mark Gold. Here. Tom Lacusa. Here. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Lynn Simmons.
Here.
Mike Barbieri. Here. This open meeting of the Long Meadow Select Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. The meeting is convening by Zoom webinar as posted on the agenda and the town's website, identifying how the public may join. There is no chat or Q&A function. All of the materials for this meeting are available on the agenda posted on longmeadow.org. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. Each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. This meeting will feature resident comment. For resident comment, using the Zoom webinar format, members of the public are attendees. If a member of the public would like to speak during resident comment, please use the raise hand icon at the bottom of the screen. The meeting moderator will promote you to panelist, unmute you, and give you permission to speak. If you join the webinar by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute and unmute. Residents who wish to speak will identify their names and addresses only. Each individual will be afforded 3 minutes for comments. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Please remember to mute your phone or your computer when you're not speaking. First item on the agenda are select board announcements. On March 27th, 2006, the Select Board adopted a waste reduction policy limiting each household to one 36-gallon barrel or bag of up to 40 pounds per week. This policy was implemented in July 2006. In addition, this policy gave the Select Board the authority to grant amnesty for certain specific periods of time when unusual amounts of waste is generated. For the 2021 holiday season, the Select Board, with recommendation from the Town Manager and the DPW, approved the granting of waste amnesty from December 27th, 2021 through January 8th, 2022 of one extra bag per household per week. That's one extra bag per household per week from December 27th to January 8th. Christmas tree pickups. Christmas trees will be picked up commencing on January 3rd and continue through January 14th. Trees should be placed at the curb for pickup with no stands, ornaments, or lights attached. Emergency notification test. On Sunday, January 16th, 2021, town will be running a test of the town's emergency notification system starting at 5 p.m. The test will consist of 2 messages. The first will be sent to all residents registered in the system. They will receive a message stating that this is Long Meadow Emergency Management with a test of the Long Meadow Emergency Notification System. If you receive this test, you are registered for the system. If you wish to modify your registration, please go to longmeadow.org and click on emergency notifications. We use this system to broadcast important information in the case of an emergency. The second test will follow a few minutes later. This message will state, this is Long Meadow Emergency Management. If this is the second message you are receiving tonight, you are registered for the Town of Long Meadow Emergency Management Notification System. If this is the first test you have received, we would ask you to go to longmeadow.org and click on emergency notifications to register for the town's emergency notification system. We use this system to broadcast important information in the case of an emergency. Sincerely, Chief Dearborn, Longmeadow Emergency Management. This test will take approximately an hour to conduct due to the number of contacts we will be pursuing. It's our hope that this will help us gain more contacts in our base system. The second test will reach contacts that are registered and not registered from the global database. After the test, we will do a database cleanup on numbers and addresses not deliverable. This will help to speed up our message delivery going forward. The town will publicize the test the week before. And those are the select board announcements for this week. Next up on the agenda are board and committee interviews. Is Marie here, Mike?
I do not see her in the chat right now.
What about Stefan?
Yes, he is. I'm moving that.
Hey, Stefan, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Can you hear me?
Sure can.
Oh, good.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're interested in joining the COA board?
Well, I grew up in Longmeadow in the good old days. I lived right across the street from Center School. My parents had an apple orchard. Our neighbors had sheep farm. And I stayed basically in the town until I went off to graduate school. And then about 25 years ago, I moved back to Longmeadow because I thought there was a great education program. It was good for me, and I thought my kids should also enjoy the education program here. I must add that Eric Lesser was a student at the high school when my daughter was there, and Eric used to come over to my house, and he and I have remained good friends. And I'm interested in the senior center, obviously, because I'm over the hill. And I went to the opening house. I was greatly impressed. Went to the first lecture there about the Armenian genocide. And I think there's so much good stuff going on in the new center. We hope that it thrives.
Absolutely. Does anybody have any questions for Stefan? Yeah, Mark.
Thank you for applying, Mr. Platzer. I guess my question is, can you kind of give us your idea of the relative roles of the director of the council or of the adult center, the COA board, and the rest of the staff at the COA, and how those roles interact or potentially don't interact?
I really don't know that much about it, I'm sorry to say. Saul Feinstone suggested that I apply for this position. I'm part of the board of trustees at the Stores Library. And I think definitely there's a lot of senior citizens in Longmeadow. And I think this is a great place where it's going to thrive. And I know some of the leaders at the senior center, and I think they're great, marvelous people. And I think this will be a great success for Longmeadow.
Yeah, Tom.
Mark, yeah. Stefan, again, thank you for volunteering for the position. And so when you think about spending time on the Council of Aging board, is there anything specific that you would see yourself doing or want to be part of or making contribution to the board?
I think there's a lot of things that need to be done. As I mentioned, I'm part of the Stores Library. I think there's a strong interaction between the two. I think a lot of the senior citizens used to go to the Storos Library. And Gene, the director at the library, wants to remain in strong contact with the senior center and get events going, people talking, book teams and whatever else, reading books, socializing. But there is a great senior citizens in Long Meadow that are not all in nursing homes and retirement homes. They're all still living at home somewhat. And we'll see what happens.
I thank you for your comments, because I think that's a great connection, the relationship. I mean, people could go to the new adult center and forget about the library, but it's really, they should be working together. And just because there is a reading room at the new adult center doesn't mean you should forget about the library. So that sounds great. Great. Thank you.
Well, in a certain way, I was kind of sad that a lot of people are not going to the Storos Library, the senior citizens. But if there's going to be an interaction, if the library is going to give books to the senior center and also have some events at the Storos Library, that'd be terrific. Because the library is kind of the hub of the town. A lot of young kids are there. But we also want older people to be socializing, not just at the senior center.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else with questions?
Can I just make one more claim to fame?
Please do.
About 30 years ago, I was involved in restoring a schooner that was built in Gloucester, Massachusetts. And there's a famous statue of the man at the wheel in Gloucester. That's the son of the original owner of the boat. I went over to Africa at least 30 years ago, helped restore it and sailed it back to the United States. And it is now the official sailing vessel of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Everybody who lives in Massachusetts is a part owner of this boat, and they should definitely touch the wheel if they ever see this boat. It's got a wonderful history. And again, Art Lesser promoted it to be the official vessel of the Commonwealth. It now belongs to the Massachusetts Maritime Academy. It's also in the New Bedford Whaling Museum areas in the summertime. And again, it's being restored again because it's a wooden boat. And as we all know, wood kind of rots in the water. So it's good that it's still alive. And I feel very proud that I was able to restore it and bring it back.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. So we'll vote on your application in 2 weeks. Hope you have a happy and safe holiday season.
And if anybody has further questions, feel free to ask. I'm retired, and I'm very busy though, but I'm retired.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Do we have Marie, Mike?
Unless she's in the chat as someone else's name, I do not see her right now.
Okay, we can move on to resident comments. If any resident has a comment, can you let Mike know either by raising your hand or?
We do have one. I'm going to move them in now. Hey, Lynn, could you try to give it a try? It's not allowing me to do so right now. Too loud. Oh, there we go.
Is that, do we have Jim Moran making the resident comment?
Yeah, it's me, Mark. I just don't see myself on the screen, but that's okay. We ready to go?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Well, my name is Jim Moran, and I reside at 48 Avondale Road. I'd like to make a few comments about COVID-19 in our new adult center. As far as I know, from opening day until today, there haven't been any COVID-related guidelines issued for the Long Meadow Adult Center. Recent activities from daily card playing to concerts and lectures have had no mask, no vaccination status, really no social distancing or capacity restrictions. Residents from other towns are free to use our senior center on a daily basis. According to the Enfield Senior Center, their Facebook page, there was a suspension of card playing, games, billiards, and coffee activities in November for a couple of weeks due to a COVID outbreak, despite the fact that they had a mask mandate in place. And there were a number of hospitalizations that were associated with this outbreak. With the emergence of the highly contagious Omicron variant, it seems logical to me that the Board of Health should be reviewing COVID policy guidelines at the new senior center. Most people who use the center are 55 plus. In fact, I think it's limited during the daytime to people who are 55 plus, and at nighttime it's open to everyone. And I think they're probably exactly being considered as the most vulnerable members of our community. Earlier today, I checked with the mass.gov website and found out there's about 7,000 town residents who are 50 and older. And I couldn't get it 55 and older because that's the way they segregate the data. It looks like 84% are fully vaccinated. They don't give any details on boosters, which leaves about 1,100 residents over the age of 50 who are unvaccinated. Now, those numbers probably are different if there are people who've gotten it out of state, but I suspect there's at least over 1,000 residents over the age of 50 who are unvaccinated. And some may be immunocompromised and some may have comorbidities. My wife Judy and I are both in our 70s. We're double vaccinated and boosted, but we decided not to use the new adult center because of the lack of any COVID related protocols, particularly in light of the new Omicron variant that seems to be able to create breakthrough sickness, even for those of us who are double vax plus boosted. I connected with Finn McCool today, the health director, and he informed me that the next meeting of the Long Meadow Board of Health is scheduled for 1 week from today, and that sometime this week they'll post an agenda. And I think our town needs to be proactive rather than reactive. And this is obviously something that's happening all over the country, including Massachusetts. Boston's done all sorts of things. We ought to be, as a town, taking proactive moves to try to minimize, things to our, vulnerable citizens. So I hope at next week's meeting, the Board of Health implements some COVID-related protocols at the senior center, at least to reduce some of the risk. Thank you for listening to my comments.
Thank you for the comment. Anybody else, Mike?
I don't see anyone with their hand raised, but I'll reiterate, because there are a few people who joined in late. If you would like to speak during resident comment, please press the raise hand icon at the bottom of the screen, and we'll let you in. All right, looks like we have one more.
Okay.
This is Marjorie Bruns. I wondered if we're speaking about the pipeline at this point, or are we not onto that yet? I'm sorry, I just joined.
Marjorie, you can make whatever comment that you want. We just ask that you provide your address first.
Okay. This is Marjorie Bruns. I live at 39 Hazardville Road. I want residents to know what will be coming if the new pipeline is approved. Okay. I urge every one of you to go and experience the sights and sounds and smells of a gas facility. Go to the Eversource Tennessee Gas Pipeline Facility on Shaker Road, just south of Pease Road in East Longmeadow. You will see a small brick building surrounded by chain link fencing. But there is more. Make sure to get out and walk around the perimeter. Even on the windy day that I chose, there was noise and smell from the gas odor of the Eversource building. The Tennessee Gas Pipeline building, however, with machinery surrounding it, is in the back. You have to get out in order to see it. It is both unsightly and very noisy with a strong gas smell. Please go and see for yourselves. Now, once you've gone, think of this experience with 2 buildings. What will be the sights and sounds and smell if the proposed buildings, 5 buildings, are built in Longmeadow on the Springfield Country Club? The East Longmeadow facility is in an open area. The far larger complex would be in a thickly settled residential area, less than a third of a mile from an elementary school. I urge each one of you to go and see what is in store. I know I've heard from Eversource that they're going to do better in Longmeadow, that they're going to enclose their buildings, that they're going to reduce the smell and the sound. However, what I found was it wasn't the Eversource building that was a problem. It was the Tennessee Gas Pipeline building, and they are answering to no one. Please go to the facility in East Longmeadow and really see what's coming. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Anybody else?
I do not see anyone as of right now.
Okay. We can move on to select board comments. Do any select board members have a comment for this evening? Yes, Mark Gold.
I have 2 quick comments. One is I want to thank Mr. Moran for his comments. Being in somewhat the same age group and understanding and seeing what's going on with COVID spikes, I too would urge our Board of Health and others to take action and protect our most vulnerable population. The other comment I was going to make was that today I had I don't know what it was, but I attended the Camden County Regional Retirement Board. I don't know a better way to report this back to the board. As most people know, they've had some controversy. The chair of the board indicated that Mr. Richard Theroux of Agawam indicated he would not run for re-election. And so his term is up the end of the year. And today the remaining board members chose to appoint Mr. Carl Schmalzi, who is actually an existing board member, to fill that role. He's, my opinion, part of the problem, not part of the solution. There were 3 other candidates, but they chose to promote and endorse, and in fact, vote to elect Mr. Schmalzi, their new chair. In terms of salary, Mr. Theroux's salary was $28,000. The PURAC, which is the pension board from Boston, in their audit, noted that salary seemed extraordinarily excessive. Somehow there was a discussion, and I'm not sure how, that salary ought to be reduced to $14,000. But in fact, they offered Mr. Schmalzi voted to offer Mr. Schmalzi this position at $22,000. So my report to the select board is the same people running the same agency with the same disregard for whether it's state agencies or other appointments. I will say that there's a group of people. I know Lynn was attending today's meeting by Zoom. I had the fortune of being there. Mr. Strange tried to attend by Zoom and did for a while, but it didn't work out well. And we're still concerned concerned about the organization, still concerned about their operations and the management of that organization. And there's a group of people continuing to try to make changes at the Hampden County Regional Retirement Board, but it's getting more and more difficult. Mr. Schmalzi, I should say, was appointed to a position for 6 years. So it's going to be a tough slog from that. My final thing is that the executive director also retired. Today, they decided to appoint the assistant executive director to the executive director. So not only do we have the same board and same chair, but we have the same operations people that will continue to run that agency. My commitment to this board, to the employees and to the retirees of the town of Longmeadow is to the extent that I can. I will continue to monitor it and challenge them and report back as what I find. Thank you.
Thank you for doing that, Mark. So there's 5 members of the board. Is that what it is?
Well, there are actually 4 members, and they elect a chair. And of the 4 members, 1 is appointed by the town treasurers. Currently, Tom Sullivan from Wilbraham, he is retired. It's being replaced by Michelle Hill from Southwick, but she did not get the vote. So Mr. Sullivan was part of the vote this week, today. But there's Tom Sullivan, there's Mr. O'Neill. Patricia Donovan is resigning, but she will be replaced through an election. And I assume as soon as the appointment of Mr. Schmalzi to chair is official, he will resign from the board and there will be an election for his position. But the fact is that the appointment has been made for chair, and there's not a whole lot we can do. I mean, I found out a few other things because I was there in person. They're holding elections and for the members, and there's some question about what I'll call the chain of custody of those ballots that they're saying that the volume is so high they've got to remove the ballots from their office to go get them open somewhere else, and it's just a sloppy operation in my opinion. And I have to watch what I say, but it's a sloppy operation, and I've said it before publicly, and I'll continue to say it. They're getting 7, 8, 9 and plus % return on their investments through PIRAC, and yet after the expenses, their gains are so low that they're surcharging the towns or charging the towns at a maximum amount to keep up with what they need to do to fund the pension. Other than the city of Springfield, the Hampden County Regional Retirement Board has the second lowest percentage of funding of any of the 45 pension boards in the Commonwealth. Springfield is at 30-something %. Springfield or Hampden County is something like 45%. Everybody, I mean, there's plenty of these agencies that are at 90-95% funded. So it's a real problem, and I think we need to pay attention to it. And I will say that there's a group of people continuing to challenge it. Lynn's part of it, and she's working hard on it. But there's just so much we can do when the state says they don't have the authority. I mean, there's a lot of people appealing to, Mr. John Parsons, who's the chair of the PIRAC board, and he said, I don't have the authority. I can just audit them, but I don't have the authority to make changes or prevent them from maintaining the same people there. So it's a challenge.
So will there be a seat open once Mr. Schmalzi becomes the executive director?
Perception is there will be, yeah, but we'll see what happens.
Thank you so much for staying on top of that. Any other? Yeah, Tom.
You're muted, Tom.
Thank you, Michael. I wanted to thank whoever was responsible for adding the additional signage to the speed reduction bump that is at the William Street by Grassy Gutter. When we had our town meeting at the DPW, on the way there, I noticed that the lights were out, and I was like, this is a nightmare because people are going to hit that and not even have a clue. And so I'm glad that we have a backup source, especially when things can change rapidly in a winter storm, so that people would be aware of that. Because it's going to be someone who's from out of town who's going to hit that at a high rate of speed. And so I'm really glad that those signs are up there now. And the other thing is, I was at the Council of Aging meeting. last Thursday, and the issue of masks came up at that meeting, so they're on top of that issue. The determination of the meeting was they were going to wait to see what was happening with the Board of Health, and then based on that, they would make a decision about what they should do for that facility. But yeah, it is a big concern. Another thing that came up with that meeting, Marge Moran mentioned that the parking at the Big Y is changed significantly since the fire at Armadas. And there are going to be some times in the next few days probably where all the parking slots near the Big Y are probably going to be filled, and you're going to have to cross the street to park. And so for those of you who aren't up for the long walk, you may want to really consider what time of day you're going to avoid that kind of an issue. But, I know they've picked up the slack since Armadas has been burned. So you just have to be patient with the parking issue. And I think that's basically it. Thank you.
Thank you. Josh or Steve, you want to take a stab at it? Go ahead, Steve. You're muted.
Soon we forget. I will chime in on the adult center. I think that I'm not even sure we need to wait for the Board of Health, but if we do, I think we should urge them to bring back the mask mandate for the town, which they undid, but times have changed since they undid it, and I think that the mask mandate for all indoor places in town makes sense. I think if the select board has any jurisdiction over the adult center, I think we should make it mandatory for the adult center regardless of what the Board of Health does. I also think that we ought to really have a vaccination requirement where you want to go use the adult center, have proof of vaccination. I think once you have it, you're done, you're on record, you don't have to keep doing it every time. But that was mentioned before. This is not, we don't have to worry about unions for this one, but I think in terms of getting the job done, for what we want to do is protect the citizenry, I think that would make the most sense for pretty much all the public buildings in town, but certainly the adult center, probably the libraries as well. That's first comment. Second comment, I'll go back to, there was a comment about what's going to happen with the pipeline. I want to share the fact that when Eversource gave out their plan of what's going to happen when the bridge goes down, as it turned out, and given the fear mongering they have about what's going to happen to Long Meadow, it won't be good. But if for some reason the Memorial Bridge blows up, 15% of Long Meadow residents will lose gas supply. 15%, not 100%, but 15%. That up until they put that map out, I don't think anybody even knew that. So I want the citizens of this town to realize that yes, we don't want the Springfieldians to go without gas. That in the event that the Memorial Bridge goes down and nothing else happens on an infrastructure level, if I can't imagine what's going to take down the bridge besides an earthquake or another tornado that comes up the river and not across the river. And if that doesn't take out basically the entire infrastructure of Western Massachusetts, or at least this area, I would be surprised. But given their tactics of they're trying to scare the pants off us, at least here in Long Meadow, that's not the case. I mean, 15% is not good, but it's not like the town is going to lose its entire gas supply because the Memorial Bridge and nothing else has been destroyed. So, but I want to make sure that the residents are really aware of that fact, because up until their public document, they have not made that statement to us at all. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the moment we've been waiting for. The town manager's report.
Thank you. So as of tonight, our COVID cases are 54, representing 57% breakthrough. So it's down from when I published this memo last Thursday. So that is good news. We're going the right direction, but it's very slow, and I think we're all concerned about the holidays. The Eastern Hampden Shared Public Health Services has posted for a health inspector. This has been going on for several months now. We did have a hire. Someone started, but then ultimately left the team. We do have a new hire that has been secured. His name is Anthony Albano, and he's going to be joining the team on January 3rd. He comes from the city of Springfield as an environmental health inspector for the public health department. The fire at the Shaker Road shopping plaza, I think most people have probably seen in the media that Armadas has secured a temporary rental of the old adult center commercial kitchen at Greenwood Center. We are utilizing the Parks and Recreation rental use form and policy. This was the same policy and rental form that was in place for people looking to use the community house, auditorium, and kitchen. So I'm happy to say that that was successfully worked out. They're in the space until December 31st, and they'll be passing out their pre-ordered meals over the next couple days. And in grant news, the Department of Ecological Restoration had a preliminary design services dam removal competitive grant round. The assistant town manager, Corinne Micey-Munns, took the lead on preparing this grant application with some of the stakeholders that we've been working with on Bliss and Laurel Park. This included the Save Our Parks group, the Connecticut River Conservancy, and the members of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. This application was successful. We'll be awarded design services up to $30,000 to help come up with a design to remove derelict reservoir infrastructure located at Cooley Brook, further down from what the actual dam structure is. There's some debris remaining in the waterway there that acts essentially as a dam. So this funding will provide the design services to help to look at removing those structures in later project years. And that actually concludes my report tonight.
Mike? Josh?
First, I just want to say, Lynn, thanks to you and to Corinne and everyone else who worked on all the grants applications. I was very happy to see all those come through. I think that's doing some good work, and so thank you for that. I had a couple questions on the COVID info. I think we might have asked you before. Do we get hospitalization info, or is that not something that's available to us?
Meaning how many residents are hospitalized at the time?
Yeah, how many of these cases are resulting in hospitalization or severe outcomes? Not that I think that's something that's good to know, but if we see that, I'd be curious of the breakthrough infections, how many of those are leading to severe outcomes? I think that'd be good for people to know if that's available.
Sure, it may be. It's not in the data that I'm provided every week, but it could be something that we do have on hand. I haven't asked for it. I will say that Department of Public Health put out a press release earlier today regarding statewide numbers, and 97% of the cases are breakthrough, but they're not resulting in serious illness or hospitalization.
You said 97%?
Yeah, I'll find that while if you have other questions, I'll pull it up. It was just sent out today.
Yeah, I did have one more question. I saw last week that the state is stopping the contact tracing program, and I saw on your the Arpa request have a $100,000 request for contact tracing. How much contact tracing can we do with $100,000, and who is doing it? And have we found it to be helpful? Because I know that it seems like with Omicron, everyone's going to get it at some point. And so we could blow through that $100,000 in a flash. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
Sure. So just let me clarify on the DPH press release from earlier today. Breakthrough Case Review is finding that 97% of COVID cases in vaccinated individuals has not resulted in severe illness.
Okay, thank you.
Just to clarify that there, yeah.
Yeah.
And so in terms of contact tracing, we have had a dedicated contact tracer. She's been with us for a while now, and the data has been incredibly useful. I think, I don't want to speak for the schools, but I think they've found a ton of value in it. She works with all of the public health nurses, and they're able to, quickly identify any close contacts and figure out if there's been any in-school spread, or in business spread, or in office setting type spread, so that we can really get to the bottom of it to prevent it from being any more significant. So there has been a lot of value in it, and yes, the CTC is folding up at the end of this year, but very few of our cases, if any, in the last few months have gone to the CTC. So we did see a lot of value throughout the entire pandemic of keeping the tracing in-house. We know our community better. We know, certain indicators to look for, and it's been really valuable throughout the entire pandemic.
Okay, thanks, Lynn.
Yeah, Tom.
Yeah, Lynn, I just had a comment, in terms of Laurel Park and that concrete debris that's lower down the creek from the original pond. Originally, that was the town swimming hole. And I heard that, people would go up there, and what I heard is they never had a drowning in that pool, in that swimming hole, all the years that the town had it open. So, but it's a bygone era. No more swimming holes like that.
Anybody else? Questions for Lynn? Alrighty, thank you, Lynn. Moving on to approval of meeting minutes. Mike, is this draft that's in here, is that the correct draft? I think you'd sent a different one.
Yeah, I re-uploaded it to the agenda with the current link that you guys.
Okay, so we're good. Okay, looking for a motion to approve the meeting minutes from December 6th.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Mike, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Strange,
Yes.
Mr. Morantz,
Yes.
Mr. Levine,
Yes.
Mr. Gold,
Yes.
Mr. Lacusa,
Yes.
Very good, very good. Moving right along to the audit report.
Mark,
Yeah,
we have to approve the minutes of 12/21? Or no, that's wrong. That's today.
12/21 is tomorrow, actually.
Okay, so we're set. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem. So the audit report, who do we have with us to go over the audit report?
All right, so I'm moving them in now. We have Jennifer Leiden, Town CFO. We have Matthew Schoen, who is the chair of the audit committee. And we also have Tanya Campbell from Melanson, who conducts the audit. So they're all in the panelists now. I'll turn it over to them.
Terrific.
Hi, Jen Leiden here. I'm not sure if you can see me, but I do want to introduce Tanya Campbell from Melanson. She performed our financial audit and has a presentation for you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I got really excited when everyone was looking forward, or said they were looking forward to the town manager report. I thought you were going to introduce me as, the best part of the night. But can someone give me access to screen share? It says it's disabled.
All right, try that. You should be all set.
Okay. Okay, so can everyone see the presentation? Okay.
Yep.
I'm always really excited when it works on the first try. Oh.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Tanya Campbell. I'm from Melanson, and I'm here tonight to present the results of the town's fiscal year 2021 audit. I'm going to start by kind of having a brief discussion about the nature and purpose of the financial statement audit, including the roles and responsibilities of most of the people on this meeting, and then briefly discuss some of the numbers in the annual comprehensive financial report. Now, in terms of the roles and responsibilities as Melanson, as your independent auditors, we are responsible for expressing an opinion on the town's financial statements. We are also responsible for planning and performing our audit to provide reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free of material misstatement, whether that was caused by an error or fraud. I want to remind you that an audit does not provide 100% assurance. We don't come in and pour through every single transaction that passes through the town during the fiscal year we're auditing. That would take us forever, and we would be in town hall probably the entire year. Instead, our audits are conducted in accordance with government auditing standards. And those standards say that we plan and perform our audit using a concept known as materiality. Now, materiality will vary based on the size of the town, and it also varies based on the different funds of the town. And in fiscal year 2021, the materiality for your general fund, which is your major fund, your major operations of the town, was about $220,000. Now, that doesn't mean we don't look at anything below that amount, because we certainly do. It just means that the auditing standards say we should focus our testing on balances at or above that level. Now, in terms of management's responsibilities as part of the audit, they are ultimately responsible for the town's financial statements. And having an audit does not relieve them of this responsibility. Management is also responsible for establishing and maintaining effective internal control over the financial reporting process, and ensuring that the town complies with all the various laws and regulations applicable to all of its activities. As part of the audit, management is responsible for making financial records and other related information available to us in a timely fashion so that we can conduct our audit as efficiently and effectively as possible. And then at the end of the audit, management is responsible for providing us with a letter that basically confirms the various representations that were made to us as part of the audit process. To the best of their knowledge, whatever they told us or documents they gave to us were accurate and true. Now, in terms of the select board's responsibilities, you were essentially responsible for the oversight of the entire audit process, which is why we're having this meeting today, so that you can review and ask questions of what occurred during the audit or the town's financial statements. You're also responsible for providing oversight of various internal controls, and as needed, the risk assessment evaluation of the towns. Where are the risk areas and what issues need to be addressed? You're also responsible for reviewing the management letter containing recommendations as a result of our audit process. There was no formal management letter in fiscal year 2021, so we will not be discussing that here tonight. Now, in terms of the annual comprehensive financial report, this year will be the town's 5th submission of that document, and the previous 4 were awarded the Certificate of Achievement in Financial Reporting, which is really, it's quite an accomplishment. It's over 130-page document, a lot of great information in there. It's quite an effort, and I just really want to recognize that not that many cities and towns actually do this process, and it does take a lot of effort from the finance department to pull this together. So it is really something to be proud of. In terms of the actual submission process, the report is required to be submitted by December 31st. It's currently in the final review process, so we'll have that final copy to the town soon, so it can get uploaded and submitted before the end of the calendar year. Once it's submitted, it goes to at least 3 members of the special review committee for their review and comments, and that whole process takes about 6 months. This past year, it was a little bit longer. Thanks to COVID, it was more like 10 months. We actually just got the results back less than a month ago. But that's generally speaking what the process looks like. Does anyone have any questions before we continue going? Okay. Now, in terms of the annual comprehensive financial report, which I'm sure everyone has read, the 135-page document front to back, so everyone's super familiar with this. The document is presented under the rules established by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, which is also known as GASB. And you'll see various references to their standards that they issue in the financial statements themselves. There are essentially 6 components to the report. First, there is management's narrative, which is one of the required components of the ACFR. It is compiled by the town and includes a great deal of information about the history of the town, as well as the operations, some information about the local economy and other capital and financial information. After that comes the audit opinion, which is actually the only part of the financial statements that belongs to us as your independent auditors. As I mentioned before, we're responsible for giving an opinion on the financial statements, while management is responsible for the actual financial statements themselves. In fiscal year 2021, we issued the town an unqualified opinion on the financial statements, which means that based on the results of our testing, we found that the town was in compliance with generally accepted accounting principles. Next comes management's discussion and analysis, which is another required narrative that essentially summarizes what's included in the financial statements, as well as some of the key numbers and results of operations from the past fiscal year. Following those, you have your 2 sets of financial statements. You have fund basis statements and government-wide statements, and we'll take a look at those in a few minutes and talk about some of the numbers on those pages. Following that, you have your footnotes and your required and other supplementary information, which essentially provide more detailed information on the actual numbers that are reported in the financial statements. So for instance, if you think of the town has a other post-employment benefit liability. That is one number in the financials, but there's a great deal of information in the footnotes that describes information about the actuarial valuation, the investment rate of return, things along that nature that support and supplement the number that's actually in the financial statements themselves. Lastly, you have the statistical tables, which is the other required component of the ACFR. This section is also compiled by the town and includes statistical data. Pretty much most tables are presented for 10 years and include a lot of information about the town's operations, rates, as well as some information about the local economy, some other summarized information based on financial data as well. So there's a lot to the annual comprehensive financial report. Now, in terms of some of the highlights from the audit, we did not find any issues during our testing of internal controls over vendor or payroll transactions. The vendor and payroll cycles are, 2 of the major cycles of the town, and a lot of data gets processed through those 2 cycles. So as part of our audit process, we obtain an understanding of what the controls are over those cycles, and then design procedures to test those controls and make sure that they're operating effectively during the year that we're auditing. So as part of the audit, we'll make random selections of payments to vendors and employee payroll for both the town and the school, and test and make sure that for vendor transactions that there's a supporting invoice and it looks reasonable and makes sense, that it's approved by someone who's knowledgeable and responsible for actually approving that type of invoice. The amounts agreed, things like that it's charged to the right general ledger account. So you're not, paying an electricity bill out of a athletic department line or something along that line. And we do the same type of thing for payroll. We'll test to make sure that the rate of pay is properly approved. And if there is a timesheet for an hourly employee, that's documented and approved as well. We also, yes.
I know you like questions during the process.
Yeah.
Random selection, which is something that my ears perked up. I'm glad that happens. And how many specific interactions do you select from and how many thousands of interactions are there?
There are a lot of transactions. We select, auditing standards say we should select 40. And if we have any issues with the 40, then we need to expand our testing to more, because one deviation, if you extrapolate that to the entire population, is obviously more than just one deviation. Although if we ever found an issue, everyone says it's always the only one that's ever been properly treated that way, obviously. But we also perform vendor and payroll tests in our federal grant audits as well. So the federal grants that we're required to test, we perform an additional test of controls and compliance for those grants. We haven't completed those yet, but there's additional selections made as part of that process as well. But the standards say we need to test 40.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Now, as part of the audit process, we also do a random selection of disbursements that would have been subject to procurement. And we test those to make sure that the proper procedures and documentation exists with the town. And we also found no issues noted during that testing as well this year. And we haven't, in the past, we have not typically found issues with these types of testing. I mean, the town has good processes, procedures, controls in place. You have knowledgeable people in charge of these processes. So that is good. I just figured it'd be worth mentioning it tonight to let you guys know that there was no issues in these tests, and they are pretty important tests in terms of our audit process, because we're testing some key controls there. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there's no formal management letter this year. And then the 3 issues that we had noted in last year's audit were resolved or are currently being addressed by the town. And the 3 issues are noted there. Reviewing the procedures in the recreation department. We had a couple suggestions there, kind of tightening the controls over write-offs and making sure that the proper procedures were in place. There was a couple write-offs in the prior year audit and refunds due to programs being canceled for COVID and things along that line, as well as looking at what the costs were for the program that the recreation department uses to do registrations, and making sure the town is evaluating the full cost of the program, because there's some fees and stuff like that are net into the receipts. So just kind of doing an evaluation there, making sure that is really the best software for the town to use for this process, because there are a couple different options out there. So that is currently underway, and the town is looking into that. We also recommended that the town, consider increasing its bonding insurance coverage for some of the key employees of the town that handle cash. So your treasurer, your collector, and the town did do a review of that and did increase those coverage amounts slightly from the prior year. And lastly, we recommend that the treasurer send letters to local banks, not just ones that the town uses for banking, but some of the other local banks as well, that to see if there's any accounts that have been opened in the past that were in the town's name or EIN that the treasurer may not be aware of. I think it used to happen a lot more in the past with like PTO accounts, school-related accounts. I think that banks are better about ensuring that the town accounts are opened by a town treasurer nowadays. But I think in the past, it used to just, people could walk in and kind of open accounts like that. There was 2 bank accounts that they discovered that were not in the treasurer's control. And they were related to the parent associations. And they have since been closed out or transferred to the treasurer's control. So that is good. It's a good process to kind of go through every couple of years. It doesn't take too much time, and just making sure that there's nothing out there that the town treasurer is not aware of that exists. Now, in terms of some of the key numbers in the comprehensive or annual comprehensive financial report, sorry, they changed the wording of the statement this year. It used to be comprehensive annual financial report, but they have since changed the name of it. So it's annual comprehensive financial report. If you're looking at a printed out version of the document, the snapshot I have here on the screen is from page 37. Otherwise, it's on page 45 of the PDF. If you actually wanted to look at the entire balance sheet itself, I just kind of zoomed in and was planning on talking about some of a couple of the numbers on that page. Now, the balance sheet is one of your fund basis statements. And as I mentioned before, there are 2 sets of financial statements in the ACPR. The fund basis statements more closely resemble the town's internal financial records. So there's not a lot of adjustments that need to be made or anything that needs to be done in terms of the numbers that are provided by the town and pulling together your fund basis statements. They're very similar to the reports you might receive on a monthly basis. The number I have boxed on the screen is your unassigned number in your general fund, which is just shy of $10 million at the end of fiscal year 2021. That balance is made up of two things. First is your general stabilization fund, which at the end of fiscal year 2021 had a balance of just shy of $6 million, which represents about just over 8% of the town's annual operating budget. It's a very healthy balance. Your stabilization fund increased by about $1.6 million from the prior year. The town has in the past made a concerted effort to set money aside into that stabilization fund when you have the funds available and you're doing it in a smart way in terms of using free cash in order to move money into that reserve. A balance of just over 8% of the operating budget is healthy. Obviously, there's no maximum limit, but that is a good number in terms of financial, security, or it's enough to cover something. Hopefully, if something does go wrong in the future, you have a decent size balance there to use if need be. The other portion of the unassigned number is your general fund unreserved number, which is essentially your what's left in your general fund after you've set aside money for encumbrances or any free cash that you voted in 2021 to use in the fiscal 22 budget. So it's what's left that's available and is not encumbered. it is, if you think about it this way, it's essentially the starting point for the town's free cash calculation. So they start with that number, and they make the Massachusetts Department of Revenue makes various adjustments, but that is your starting point there. So it's what's available and not set aside to be spent by the town. That balance represents just shy of 6% of the town's operating budget, which is also a very healthy balance. And that number remained essentially the same as the prior year. So that is good. It did not go down, even with, the pandemic essentially started in 2020, but it did continue obviously into 2021 and will unfortunately in 2022 as well. But the fact that number remained essentially the same is a good sign. So it means that, what feeds into the number is your excess, your revenue in excess of budgets and your turnbacks from your departments. Those all close to your unreserved number. So you're budgeting well enough that number is not decreasing from the prior year. So that is a good sign, especially after a year of a pandemic and not really knowing what that's going to bring. Does anyone have any questions about that? Want to move on?
And Tanya, this is Mark Gold. I have a question that is on the sheet that you show, the say key numbers balance sheet, and it shows page 37. On page 6 of the document that we got, it talks about different numbers and different percentages. And I understand that some of it is free cash, but how do we compare your numbers on this sheet with what it says in general reserves? It says general reserves jumped to 8.54 million, and among other things.
Okay. Can we circle back to that in just a minute? I just don't have a printed out page of the document itself, and I'm not sure I can stop sharing my screen and get to that page.
No, that's fine. It can
wait. Page 6 is part of the town's introductory section. So I know that there's some numbers in there. Those numbers are pulled, from the finance department, from the internal town records. And I'm not sure, I'd have to look and see what numbers they are including in those balances there. The general fund unreserved number may be slightly different in the town's records than what we have booked here. But I'd have to, because we do have to do some small adjustments there, but I'm guessing it's essentially the stabilization fund and the general fund balance. But I know that there's a slight difference there. So I can take a look at that in just a minute.
Tanya, can I just jump in really quick? I believe what you're looking at, Mark, is it says as of July 1, the general reserves will jump to 8.4 million. Tanya's numbers are at the end of fiscal year 2020. So they were estimates, but they weren't as of the close with DOR's numbers.
So hers were estimates of June 30th and DOR's are estimates of July 1st.
It says will jump. So they were estimates, but Tanya's numbers are actuals from what was approved through DOR.
We'll figure that out.
Okay, I can take a look at that.
Better later.
Or I can get back to you on that. Yeah, okay. Does anyone else have any other questions on this page? All right. Now, the next page I wanted to look at is page 35 of the document itself, which is page 43 of the PDF statement. I have a snapshot here of the statement of net position, which is one of your government-wide statements. Now, your government-wide statements essentially take the town's operations and make an attempt to show them like a business. So you have your fund basis statements, which are very much like your town internal records, and then your fund basis statements add items such as the town's capital assets, your long-term debt, and other long-term liabilities like your pension liability and your Opeb liability. And the government-wide statements essentially distinguish between two types of activities: your governmental activities, which include your general fund, your grant funds, your capital project funds, as well as some of your trust funds. And those numbers get consolidated into the governmental activities column. And your business type activities represent the town's enterprise funds. So that's the only distinguishing factors between those two columns. The government-wide statements are really great for showing the true assets and liabilities of the town, but they're not how the town runs on a day-to-day basis. So if you think about your long-term debt, you have a repayment schedule, you're paying those each year. Your pension liability or Opeb liability, the government-wide statements book those entire liabilities, but from a town operations standpoint, you're paying those as you go. You're paying on those on a yearly basis as the actual costs are incurred. So you pay your retiree health insurance every month on a health insurance bill. Your pension liability, you're paying that as part of an annual assessment. So they are important, and they do get looked at by your financial advisors, bond rating agencies, things like that. But in terms of actually looking at the operations of the town and how you're operating on a daily basis, the fund basis statements are more accurate for those types of things. Now, the two numbers I have highlighted on this page are essentially, other than your long-term debt, your two biggest liabilities out there. The first one is the town's net pension liability, which represents the town's share of the Hampden County Retirement System's unfunded liability. And I know Mark did discuss that to some degree earlier. At the end of fiscal year 2021, the town's net pension liability was just over $47 million, which did decrease slightly from the prior year. There's a couple of factors that go into calculating that liability, and part of it is the town's share of that liability based on all the different members of the system, and the town's share did increase slightly in fiscal year 2021, but that slight increase in your percentage of the total system was offset by the fact that the system had slightly better market results in 2020, calendar year 2020, from the prior year, so that the system itself was slightly better funded in fiscal year 2021 than they were in the prior year. So because of that, your overall liability went down slightly. The system is due for a new valuation next year, and those, when they have a new actuarial valuation, those are the years where the liability kind of jump up or down because there's more data and more review of the actual assumptions that are used in calculating that liability every other year. So it stayed pretty consistent this year, but depending on what they changed for assumptions and how the market results were for calendar year 2021 will impact that liability, and that liability will probably change more next fiscal year.
Tanya, I have a question.
Yes.
So liability is based on the number of employees and how much they would be able to draw and retire during their retirement years?
Yeah, so the actuary takes all that data from the system and calculates based on the people currently receiving benefits, as well as the members in the system that are still contributing, and all the various demographics of the members, and how much longer they need to work, things along that nature, and predict out what the system is going to essentially need to pay out in future years, and then that entire liability gets allocated to the various members of the retirement system based on their percentage share of the system.
All right.
Covered payroll reports.
So, but the more that we have, like in terms of that liability, if we were able to put more money into that fund, then the interest from that, in theory, could eventually pay that liability.
It could. So kind of the tricky part is the actuaries, when they're doing their calculation, they use various assumptions. So for instance, they're going to assume that there's a 6.5% rate of return on investments. And then every new valuation, they say, okay, we assumed there was going to be a 6.5% rate of return, but there was really only a 4.5%. So then what we thought was going to happen to liability didn't happen. So now the liability is bigger because you essentially lost money there based on what they thought you were going to do. So, so every couple of years, those assumptions get looked at and kind of revised based on the current market and what's going on there. So while it seems like because you're paying in this funding schedule every year, you should be putting enough money into it to actually reduce this liability. If the assumptions that the actuary has and the retirement system don't come to fruition, your funding schedule is not going to be accurate, which is why it gets revised probably every couple of years. So there's a lot of factors that go into that calculation, but.
Right, but the goal is that the town doesn't want to get to a point where we can't afford to keep up on our payments, in the actual real time.
Right.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions or comments on the pension liability, Mark? Oh.
No, it's not on pension liabilities, but it's on this slide.
Okay. Do you want me to talk about the Opeb liability?
No, I just, it's a question that came up from the business type activities. And maybe this is for Jennifer Leiden more than you, Tanya. And it's, we generally put our stabilization funds in business type activities, water stabilization, sewer stabilization, or that kind of thing. The question I have is, one of the noted exceptions that was stated is our stormwater stabilization fund is not in a business type activity. And there's an explanation down in the back of the document why, but I'm just wondering, it didn't explain when those will be considered business type activities.
I gotcha.
When that will get in that category.
Right. Yep. No, that's true. So your stormwater fund was voted by the town to be an enterprise fund and operates like an enterprise fund in terms of how it's treated from your budget process and your tax rate process, the tax recap and stuff like that. But for GASB purposes, intentionally it was done this way. You didn't want to start with these huge, rates and assessments to the members of your town. But it doesn't cover all the rates don't cover all the costs. You're subsidizing that enterprise fund with general fund inflow of money. So at this point, because it's not covering all the costs of operations, we do not show it as an enterprise fund for the financial statements.
Okay, our policy or our plan is to increase the percentage of which the stormwater sewer stabilization fund, if you will, is self-sufficient. I think it's 6% a year, 6.5% a year. At what point does that qualify? Does it have to be 100% to qualify?
No,
type activity?
It doesn't have to be 100%. And that's a discussion we can kind of have with the town each year as to what point it makes sense to show it as a true enterprise fund. But if it's still, and I, off the top of my head, I don't remember what percentage the actual rates covered the cost in fiscal 2021. But it was certainly too low to be self-sufficient. So definitely something that's going to happen in the future. It will move from a major governmental fund over to an enterprise fund for financial statement purposes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The next number I wanted to look at on this page was the town's net Opeb liability, which is the town's share of the retiree health insurance costs. And unlike the net pension liability, there's no requirement to actually fund the liability at this time. But the town is still required to have an actual evaluation to determine what that liability is and report that in the financial statements. Fiscal year 2021, the liability was just under $26 million, which was a decrease of about $4 million from the prior year. Now, the main reason for this decrease was the town moved its funds from just a regular bank account into the state trust system. So the rate of return was much better in the fiscal year, which caused the actuary to increase your discount rate, which is what's one of the key numbers in terms of determining your liability. So essentially your rate of return increased quite a bit in fiscal year 2021, and therefore the assumption is that the plan is better funded and will cover more costs in the future. So the liability itself went down. When the actuary calculates the liability, they take the entire liability and deduct the Opeb trust fund in terms of calculating that net number, that net liability there. So because the plan is now just over 15% funded in 2021, causing that increase in funding cause a reduction in the town's overall liability. So that's a good sign, and that should continue. Hopefully for years to come, that you should see that liability decrease, probably by a pretty good amount each year going forward, because the town is making an effort to put money into the Opeb trust fund, even though it's not necessarily a requirement at this point in time. And as long as the rate of return continues to be good in the state trust system, that liability should continue to go down, which is what you want to see in terms of your liabilities. So that is good. That's the town is doing a good job in terms of setting money aside into that fund and making an effort to reduce that long-term liability.
Tanya, I have a question.
Yep.
So when funds grow and we reduce our liability, then how would that affect our tax rate? Would that mean that we would need less tax money to cover our budget?
Essentially, at some point, and it's up to the town really when they want to do this, you have money in your Opeb trust fund, which can be used to cover retiree health insurance costs. So funds can be taken out of that trust fund to pay for the retiree health insurance costs as part of the general fund budget. The town just has to make the decision, like at what point do you want to actually start doing that? Do you want to wait until the liability is fully funded, or, you're still putting money into it, into the Opeb trust fund? How much you're going to take out of it, and at what point does that not help your trust fund grow and to cover that future liability? So there's a balance there, and it's really a town by town decision. There are some towns that put some money in and take a little bit of money out to help supplement the general fund budget in terms of covering those retiree health insurance costs. But that could ultimately help the towns, reducing the amount that needs to be raised by taxes to cover those costs.
Okay, and then we could just take a percentage. So if it was earning 6%, and we 2% of that, we could reduce our taxes, but yet not really hurt the fund too much because
Yep.
So, but we have a ways to go until that happens.
That is up to the town, but yes, I mean, I would, if you can, wait on that. Just, obviously the more money you're putting in there, the faster it's going to grow and the more that liability will reduce, quicker. So.
Well, we hope we can make it to about 2030.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Hopefully when you're done paying the pension liability and, start. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Does anyone else have any other questions? Yes, that was all I had. Yes. Mark? Oh.
Yeah, first of all, Tanya, thank you very much. It's very comprehensive. Can we get a copy of that PowerPoint presentation? I don't believe it was in our slide deck.
Sure.
Which would be helpful. And most of I went through the document we didn't get, which was the ACFR, and had a bunch of comments or questions. And I think many of these may be back to Jennifer Leiden because it was the town's documents. So Mark, with your permission, I'd like to go through my questions if I could.
Please do.
Okay, so first of all, Jennifer, there are some typos, and I don't know if you want me to just send you an email on them, but things like page 3, there's a word type drawn clearly. The school committee terms of office on page 11 are wrong. That kind of stuff. We can go through I had just a handful of those, but my big questions were, primarily a couple of the ones I asked on OPEB, stormwater, and fees, but mostly it was, where do we go and how do we make the decision that Tanya said we had about starting to use OPEB funds, especially when we're being, pressed, if you will. We're now at 15.8% or 15.58% of funding of OPEB. It's earning money. I know that we put in a program to continue to fund it, but at some point, how do we make that decision?
Well, we're able to operate without using those funds right now. And we're able to operate without using free cash right now. And our operating budget, our taxes sustain our operating budget. So I wouldn't do anything until that doesn't happen anymore. And if that happens through reaching a tax ceiling or another catastrophe happens or something else happens, those are the places that you would go to minimize your budget without reducing FTEs.
Okay, that makes sense. But, Tanya showed us that graph that I guess was on page 37. I referred to page 6. On page 6, it says our general reserves and OPEB balances are at 11.95% versus a target of 5 to 10%. Since we're over that target, should we be making a recommendation to put the money above our target into the OPEB funding or something like that?
I brought that recommendation up to the finance committee because we're higher than our financial policies, and this number looks pretty good. I brought up a recommendation to start paying down future reserves, and I believe I brought it up in the budget presentation. And one of the recommendations I would do is to start paying down our debt, because our debt to revenue ratio is so high. This is something that's looked at by the auditor, and if we have additional revenues at the end of the year or free cash, I prefer to pay down our future debt obligations
That's fine suggestion. I don't know how we can make that happen. Hopefully we can make that happen. Does it need to go through the finance committee, or is that just a recommendation and it's something we can, I don't know, put in the budget or put on a town warrant or something? Because it's a lot of money and it would make sense to reduce our debt doing that.
I, obviously want to make a recommendation to adjust our financial policy and maybe include or adjust it to have different options available to the town when we are hitting our goals.
Okay, great, thanks.
We can draft something up for you guys to look at.
Yeah, the final thing is I'll comment on the sixth section there, statistical tables. I'm a statistics geek and engineer. I thought it was just fascinating for people who didn't get to the back of the document to look at those statistical tables. I would encourage everybody to look at them. They're really, really good. One last question, and this is for Mr. Schoen, and that is a question I ask every year, and that is, did the auditors speak to the audit committee absent the presence of our management and employees?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Matt Schoen. I'm the current chair of the audit committee. Just to address your question directly, yes, we made sure, as we did with previous years, to take an opportunity to speak directly with the auditor staff, specifically Ms. Campbell, without any town staff present. The idea there being to ensure that the discussion has as much candor as possible. And the result of that discussion was unsurprising, in that the auditor concluded that the town was responsive to the data needs that it presented in order to conduct its audit, and that everyone was hopeful that the town would remain on a good track of progress that it is. So I guess we took that opportunity and the results were positive.
Thank you. Those are my questions. Appreciate it.
Okay, one more question for Jennifer. So, Jennifer, you talked about taking some money that we currently have to pay off long-term debt. Would that kind of decision be based on interest rates at all? Because, we don't get much from the banks for interest on the accounts. And would it be money better placed into paying off long-term debt based on interest?
I'd have to work with, the financial advisors to see if it's old debt we pay down rather than new debt. Paul just did a lot of work in making sure that the rates stay stable throughout the next handful of years. So, I definitely would work with the financial advisors to see what was the most advantageous way to, or which projects to pay down first. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Or can I just follow up with one question? Jennifer,
sure.
We've gotten quarterly this audit correction report. And I know there's no new management letter, but I think there's some open items that remain on there. Do you intend to try to kind of provide us at some frequency with the status of those items on the audit correction report?
Sure, I can do that right now.
You don't need to do it. Generally, just submit it. Really, just submit it so we know that what progress is being made. That's fine.
They are, and I will.
Thank you.
Any more questions for the team? Very good. Tanya, thank you so much for your presentation, and Jen and Matthew. I think we're all set. I hope you guys have a good night and a happy holiday.
Thank you. I think the board usually votes on whether to accept the audit report based on the recommendation from the audit committee. So
make a motion that we accept the audit report.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Mike, can you call roll, please?
Mr. Strange?
Yes.
Mr. Morantz?
Yes.
Mr. Levine?
Yes.
Mr. Gold?
Yes.
Mr. Lacusa?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
thank you. Happy holidays. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to ARPA funding prioritization.
Thank you. So in your packet was a spreadsheet that listed out all of the applications received. And then there were also all the applications linked on the agenda there. This was a memo that had gone out to all department heads and boards and committees asking for their ARPA eligible project requests to be submitted to myself. And I would look through them and prioritize a list along with the finance director. So this list here in front of you tonight is what has been prioritized based on those requests and based on conversations the finance director and I have had regarding eligibility and what the ultimate goal was in our mind for the use of these funds. So I'm happy to walk you through it or talk to you individually about them or just answer specific questions that you might have. I do have the finance director here tonight who's been attending quite a few ARPA webinars to learn more about the program. Our plan has been to submit to, well, first we're calculating the lost revenue because that is one area that you can submit up to 4%. Is it, Jen? I think it's 4% for lost revenue. So we did out that calculation to figure out exactly what that would be. And it brings us to, if I'm remembering right, $4.1 million. And that's one area of eligibility that will not require the same level of ongoing reporting as if you were applying for a different area of funding that does require ongoing reporting. So right away, we plan to capitalize on that 4.1 million, which leaves us about $500, almost $600,000 in funding that would need to be ARPA project specific. And as you can see in the list here, I think we have several that will meet that no problem. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, or if there's a specific way you want to go through this, let me know. And Jen, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add about eligibility or the block revenue calculation.
Nope. Yep, the growth rate was 4.1% from the federal government. We were just under that. Our average growth rate was about 2.1%. So we were able to use the federal number of 4.1%. So basically that calculated out at $4,028,000. So like I said, almost 4.1 million. So the majority of our projects can be funded under the lost revenue portion of eligibility.
Yeah, Mark.
Yeah, I guess, Lynn, my question is, what was the basis or bases for prioritizing these requests? Were any requests not considered, although eligible, not considered, a priority? And secondly, there's some items here that are, I guess I'd say, potentially controversial, and I'll point those out if you want to, but how do you handle those, or how do we look at those?
Sure. So in terms of what we used for prioritization, we looked at non-recurring expenditures, and we looked at projects that would go forward had we not been hit by the pandemic, and trying to capitalize on getting those projects done, but also projects that would not increase, by using ARPA funding, would not increase the tax levy. Additionally, getting down to more finite detail here, projects that had not shown up on the capital plan in prior years, I did not fully fund, and instead funded 10% to develop design plans, so that eventually in out years, they could either be capital items or come back for additional ARPA funding if there were still reserves left.
Well, what did you mean by funded at 10%? I mean, if somebody said, I need $70,000 for something, you said we can give you 7,500.
Down. So if you look down under locker room renovation at the police department, right, the ask was for $150,000. There's no design plans for that yet, so it was an estimate. So what I've done is prioritized funding 10% of the project to develop design plans. So we actually know if it's really going to cost $150,000 to do it. The best example I have is the glass showcase replacement panels at the high school. We had an estimate for that just based on, a rough idea, and that was $60 to $75,000. The bid just came in at $250,000. So I want to get a better idea on what these projects are actually going to cost before we earmark spending money to do them.
Okay. Can you also explain the light tower project that I saw no description anywhere about that?
Sure. The light towers came in kind of late in the process here as a result of emergency management conversations with department heads, especially with this last town meeting that we just had, the special fall town meeting. We don't have enough light towers to light up outdoor spaces to provide safe access or egress to and from these types of meetings. So we thought this would be a good use of some Arpa funding to help provide some accessory lighting for these temporary type situations where large amounts of people are attending something.
Thank you. That makes sense. I didn't understand what they were. The other concern I have, and I don't know where this goes, is there's some capital items there that look to me to be new. And if we buy those, does that mean that X number of years from now, we're on the hook to pay for them again? In other words, once we got something, it's like, when they wear out or get used up or something, we're going to replace them. Are we kind of increasing our base costs for the town for some of these items?
So I don't want to assume I know what you're talking about, but if it's the cardiac monitors or the electronic voting mechanisms, is it those types of items?
Yeah, it's that kind of stuff. I mean, I saw a couple other items from the fire department that didn't look like some of them, it's clearly, it's falling apart. We used it up during the pandemic. We're kind of accelerating the purchase. I mean, for me, something that would make a lot of sense is accelerate the purchase of a ambulance, which is very Arpa kind of use that we used up, but I didn't see that here. I was shocked.
Sure. So the first two items under fire department don't meet the monetary threshold to be capital items. But the cardiac monitors, those have been a capital item in the past. This is actually a replacement. So it's taking it off the capital plan, which then allowed additional funding to be spent elsewhere in capital. Certainly once Arpa is exhausted, yeah, I would imagine seeing those back on a capital plan in future years. If I remember right, I think they're about a 5-year lifespan, but I can verify that. And then certainly, light towers, yeah, those would have a lifespan as well. But those would also...
Infiltration studies are all...
Yeah, so the water infiltration...
To me, that's stormwater enterprise fund, right?
It certainly could be, but our stormwater enterprise fund is very low funded. So this ARPA plan gives us the ability to get some of those projects done without having to tap into that, because right now the number of projects that we have greatly exceeds what the stormwater enterprise fund can support.
And I think the final thing I'll just comment on is the center school window project. It's listed as $1.2 million, and I know you suggested ARPA fund half of that, and the other half split between community preservation and capital funding. Lynn, I know I sent you the note. You saw it that the building committee looked at those windows and really believes that they need to justify replacing them. That the woods, last time we replaced windows, the wood was rotted. There was really energy inefficient. And what we're saying is they don't operate. And I think we owe it to the townspeople to validate that the windows aren't operable, aren't able to be made operable, rather than we just like to have new windows and we can get the federal government to pay for them. I think there's a lot of other things we might be able to do. And that's one of the things I see as potentially controversial within some parts of the community that are looking at these funds.
Yep, no, and I understand there's definitely differences of opinion on those windows. It's an item that's been on the capital plan for several years now. It was originally requested to be phased in over 3 years, but this past year, with the constant opening and closing of windows there to try to let more airflow in, it quickly rose to the top of the priority list for facilities because they've been dispatching staff to that building every single day to open and close those windows. And it's a small 5-person facilities team, so that's a lot of resources to do every single day. But I have heard those comments both from building committee and community preservation and capital planning. So I know facilities is taking a closer look at that as well.
Anybody else?
From here with this list.
I'm sorry?
Where do we go from here with this list? Is it approved? I mean, do we have to get any further approval beyond the select board to spend this money? I mean, it's not town-based money. It's not tax revenue.
Right. Yeah, no, we can approve these expenditures. But I did just want to make a comment, and then so when I first saw this list, not knowing the expanse, I guess, of the lost revenue portion of the allowed usage, I was curious as to how we were going to justify the expenditures. But it's great that we have so much flexibility under that lost revenue provision. So in light of that, I would say, all of these are viable expenditures. I don't have any problem with any of these. With the one caveat that I would prefer that we earmark another project or two for the $1 million that is marked for a future stormwater project resulting from the stormwater master plan. I just feel like there are projects to be done now. There will be more money, next year, either through the federal infrastructure bill or through our natural ways of funding projects, bonding and whatnot. I just feel like we got the $1 million now. We should probably use it on projects.
Mark, you were cutting in and out a little bit, so I just want to make sure I understand. You're talking about earmarking some stormwater money for items that are identified in the Resilient Stormwater Master Plan?
So my long and the short of it is, my objection is earmarking $1 million of our $4 million for a future project. I know we have projects now. I'd rather spend that $1 million now. And, if we have so many capital projects that we're going to need to get done in the way of infrastructure that, some of it's going to have to come from bonding, some of it's going to have to come from other sources. Why wait?
Yep. Thank you.
But Mark, spend that $1 million on what? I mean, Lynn, is there a list of stuff that
there's a list?
See here that there's other projects?
I was looking at the 5-year capital plan. And there's certainly projects in the 5-year capital plan that we could get done.
There are. I can certainly connect with engineering. The applications that you received in your packet were what I received. So I was prioritizing this list based on what type of responses I received. There were very few, if any, stormwater applications received other than the Resilient Master Plan. So I hear you, and
Are we bound to those applications?
no, but I did want to be respectful of the process and didn't want to handpick certain things without applications to back them up. I also am sensitive to the capacity that DPW has to take on all this work right now, knowing that what you're not seeing here is included in the capital plan for water and sewer work. So I didn't want to overwhelm them either, because that's not, nobody's happy when that happens because nothing gets done. So if there's a way.
There applications that were not funded? I mean, obviously there were, because looks like there was like $2.5 million in yeah. Were there applications from departments that were not funded?
Yes.
Okay. So, I mean, I don't really, I'm an infrastructure guy. I would prefer we use the money on infrastructure, but, to be respectful of the process. I just feel like I wouldn't want to waste that $1 million this year. So if there's other projects that didn't get funded, maybe we should fund those.
And then this is 2026 we have to spend this money, or 2025, or something like that?
It needs to be allocated or earmarked, however you want to say it. I think, Jennifer, by 2024, right? And
24, and then we have to report on it till 26.
So I guess my question repeats. So where do we go from here? Do we just say, this is now the list, let's move forward, or you're going to bring this back to us and tweak it? Are we going to have some kind of debate item by, becomes a tough decision.
Yeah. Well, I don't think I really need much of any response, other than I wanted to have a discussion about this and see if there were some big sticking points for you that you weren't okay with. But some of these can get moving right away. And some of them are actually already moving, like the air handler replacement at the high school. Shifting that to Arpa then gives $345,000 to capital to work with again, because that had been funded at town meeting last year. So that's already in process. And then a lot of this other stuff can really just hit the ground running with it. Because we've been kind of ready for some of these. We just haven't had funding sources to make it happen. So if this list looks good to you, I can provide you monthly or quarterly updates on the status of a lot of this. And then we'll have a better idea once we start getting, real-time estimates back, whether or not there's some extra money left.
With the pain of being thought of as nuts here, but let's take the air handlers at $425,000 as an example. I mean, if we can use ARPA money and not spend that money, one thing we could do is, roll it back into the capital plan, cut their capital by $425,000, and Jennifer, our budget's balanced for next year, because we're going to reduce the capital stabilization into the capital planning by actually less than 420. They'll get an increase and we'll save some money. Now, I don't know if that's considered one-time use of funds, but it's capital and not operating expenses. I mean, I think we need to be resourceful and look at all possible uses of these monies. And I agree. The ventilation is kind of classic ARPA money. Let's just do it.
Yeah, I'd like to just comment that, Lynn, I appreciate all the work you've done to figure out, this list of what things should be looked at immediately and what things aren't eligible and so forth. And so I support your efforts to use the spending. And then it sounds like things will kind of sort themselves out, and then we might have a better idea at a second round. So if there was additional funds to be allocated, is that something we would do in this fiscal year, or would we wait until next year?
I think this fiscal year might be too soon.
Okay.
So it would likely be next fiscal year.
Okay.
So Lynn, in Agawam, the mayor was the one who kind of signed off on the ARPA allocations. City council did get involved. So I'm wondering if there's some sort of formal acceptance that we need to engage in, or whether you can just go and in terms of like for reporting purposes, or I don't even know.
I haven't seen anything on that yet, and I don't know if you have, Jennifer. We were looking at this similarly to CARES Act funding. Came into the town and we allocated how it was going to be spent. And I believe we have half of this money now, close to, and the other half will come later.
Correct. We have half of it now, and we'll have to report on it in April. And I believe the town manager is responsible for allocating the funds to the projects and making sure that they're in line with what the scope of service of the funding is per the Treasury.
Okay.
I will say that we are going to do our absolute best to get eligibility signed off on before we really embark on individual projects. I specifically really sought to do that with the CARES funding, and I had approval on one project that I received approval in writing twice from administration and finance. And then when we submitted the final report, they denied it. And then we appealed it and they denied it again, even though we submitted documentation with their approval of it originally. So I am very cautious and will tread lightly to make sure that we are getting all of these projects okayed before we really start diving into them.
Sounds great. Any other questions or comments for Lynn or Jen? All righty, thank you so much for putting that together.
Mark, just a quick comment.
Yeah.
Now that this list is public, Lynn, my fear or my concern is you're going to get bombarded now with all these citizens who say, well, I have these great ideas, is the process close? I mean, what if somebody really does come up with a good idea? Are we still open to that? Because I says, we asked committees, we asked department heads, but we didn't necessarily use 15,000 brains in the community.
Correct. Yeah, and I gave that a lot of thought, just about a public allocation. And what it really boils down to is it's 4.6 million. And that is a drop in the bucket compared to the number of projects that we have at hand that we already know about. And additionally, the communities that have deployed public processes or public use of the funds, they already have the infrastructure set up administratively to handle that. Most of those are entitlement communities that have staff dedicated to doing just that on a daily basis with their HUD money. We just don't have that. We don't have that ability. We would have had to use some of this ARPA money to hire someone to come on board to handle that process. And I ultimately didn't think that was the best use of our funding. I did have a very brief conversation with a member of the William Goldthwait Fund, which is why you see it at the bottom there, where they do provide that to residents of Long Meadow that are in need, and they did ask for funding to help be that resource. And so I did fund that request there at the bottom on the list that you see. So to answer your question though, Mark, I think we would have to then take another look at the list to say, well, which of these projects would not be a priority based on what came in from a member of the public, and we'd have to have a hard conversation. It's something we could do, but it will be hard to do once we really get moving on some of these projects.
Thanks, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Anything else on the ARPA stuff? Very good. On to facility rentals.
Okay, this was an item that was under select board comments at your last meeting. I prepared the memo that's attached to your agenda along with all of the supporting documentation. Rentals of town buildings had been paused during the pandemic, primarily because we did not want additional people in the building, and also the lack of custodial resources that we had. We do not have the resources to clean the facilities and also set them back up after an event happens. So those have been paused. Now that the new adult center has opened, both myself, the the Parks and Rec director, the adult center director, the CFO, and some other support staff have been meeting to talk about rentals of facilities. We've also just posted for program assistance to help fill nighttime and weekend hours at the adult center. Right now, it's currently just open 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., but we know that there's a need to open up for night and weekend hours. We just don't have staff yet to do that. Additionally, we want a facility usage policy and request form to follow when we do open up for those extra hours, but we also want it to be somewhat consistent with the rest of the town buildings. So we started looking at what the school department does and what other municipalities do, and we're modeling a process after that. It's very similar to the policy that we're looking at utilizing, and the form that we're looking at putting into play is almost identical to what the school department does. So there's different categories of requests. If you're a town board or committee or town-sponsored event, you use the facility free of charge, and then the list cascades down from there depending on the type of entity that you are. A for-profit commercial venture would definitely pay the highest tier. I know that there is some unsettled feelings about doing this, but I just want to point out that this is already happening in the community at the school buildings. It costs money to keep these buildings open at night, and it costs money to keep them maintained. The program assistants at the new adult center are being funded for the first 2 years through a donation from LACCF. These are not in the town budget right now. This is seed money to get the town on its feet with being able to financially support these positions on their own. The donation that was made from LACCF will not cover the full hours of the two part-time positions. So there will need to be some town funding just initially as soon as we open those hours up. But we think that we should be able to afford the $2,000 or $3,000 that will be the difference. But in order to look at this as a sustainable opportunity, we have to be able to have some additional revenue to help support that. And as you'll see in the memo here, I point out that the last select board meeting was the budget, the FY23 budget kickoff. And we're projecting a level service budget, and we're asking departments to show a budget with a 0.7% cut. And that at the adult center, just as it stands right now, is $1,215 cut. And that's, again, without those two positions in there and without additional revenue. It also doesn't account for increase in any salary costs next year or any other costs that may go up for next year. So I don't take this lightly. I know that there's many good organizations in the community that we would all love to support and give them free use of our town facilities, but I don't believe that's the responsible thing to do, and I don't believe that we're in the position to do that.
Mark? Yeah, Tom.
Thanks, Lynn. I appreciate the work you put into it. and then consulting other communities to see what they are doing. So I guess one thing would be when you look at, some of these groups, they may meet, like 8 times a year or something. Would there be any chance that you could have for folks who are using it over a longer period of time, have a different rate than those who are one-time users? I don't know if that would make a difference or if anyone's ever done anything like that. And I guess the second thing is that we have groups that, with COVID, they have not been meeting face to face. So, and it may be that isn't going to happen for another month or so, anyways. But it would be something that would be nice to put in place, maybe sometime in January, and groups that might be able to meet in February could have an idea of what it would cost them, so they can plan accordingly. So, but thank you for your work.
We are working to finalize this policy and form early January. All of this is all contingent on getting program assistants to apply for the job at the Adult Center and be able to begin work as soon as possible. That position's been posted. It's available on the town website. We're looking at 2 positions that are 12 hours a week. So if you know anyone that's interested, definitely encourage them to apply. Right after the new year, the group is coming back together again to pull the rest of our research together and then make some final decisions on the policy and the form. So I am hopeful, Tom, that we can meet that late January, early February timeline.
Great, thank you.
Anything else for Lynn on this? Yes, Steve.
I have a question in terms of the athletic part of the adult center, the basketball court or the pickleball courts or the tennis courts or volleyball court, that whole big facility. Is that going to have its own different set of rental? I mean, I would assume it's going to be used. Is there a way is that going to be charged as well? Is there going to be some sort of rate for that? As opposed to, I want to have a meeting room with 12 people. It's going to cost me $50 to go do that. As opposed to, I want to have my basketball, whatever that facility is going to be used for by organized groups. Is that going to be part of the payment plan?
Yes.
Can you be any more specific?
Well,
yes, it's a good answer. But.
Yeah, it's still in development, but we've been looking at the school department fee and how they have it structured, and they do have a rental of the LHS gymnasium or the elementary or middle school gymnasiums. So, I think that would be a good benchmark if you really want specifics. In the packet, there is the form that's currently used by the school department. So I anticipate it'll be closely modeled after that. I do think that there's also, some desire to offer open gym time at the new adult center, so that, people that want to get in and use the facility have the opportunity to do that too, without having to be part of a group that's renting it.
Anyone else? Okey-doke. Thank you for that, Lynn. On to the library operating agreement. I think you have an update on that.
Yes. Yesterday I received a request that this item be taken off the agenda. On Friday, I had the opportunity to meet with the executive director of stores, along with a board member who was given the made representative of the board to meet with me to talk about this issue. We had a really good conversation Friday, and then Sunday the request came from the library board to not have this go forward tonight for discussion. So it will be status quo as to how it's been operating the last several years, and no change to the agreement is being requested.
Any questions for Lynn on that?
I want to comment that, I know because I was consulting to the library board with the agreement last year. And so I appreciate Lynn's work to get this straightened out. And I know it may seem like an easy thing. I just, she says, oh, I just, they just returned this, but I know it took quite a bit of Lynn's time, and I appreciate that. So nice work.
Anybody else? Okay, on to energy and sustainability recommendation.
And I believe this maybe was on the agenda a little bit prematurely as we were reaching our Thursday deadline. We did not have all the information that we needed. So this was on there, but this is actually not a recommendation for you tonight.
Okay. On to the bash at the Adult Center. Looking for a motion to approve the one-day liquor license for the Adult Center.
Mark, I'll make a motion that we approve the one-day liquor license for December 21st, which is tomorrow, at the Adult Center.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Yeah, Josh.
Yeah, so I know this came up recently. Last time we approved a one-day liquor license for the Council on Aging building, or the Adult Center, sorry. And I'm not saying this one in particular, but it does seem like, it seems odd to me that there would be a lot of liquor events there. And I wonder if that's going to be part of the policy. I know I looked at the community house policy that you have to get special approval for the one-day liquor license, obviously. And there is an increased fee if you will have alcohol at a event. So I'm wondering from Lynn if that will be part of, if that's being looked at for the Adult Center policy going forward.
Yes, it would be.
Okay.
And I believe the select board town manager policies already have something in there about liquor licenses on town property.
The ABCC also limits the number of one-day liquor licenses an organization can get in a year.
Okay, Steve, did you have anything? Yeah.
Yes, I don't support this. Unless the town has a policy about, in our buildings for either masking or vaccinations, this seems to me we're just inviting super spreader events without taking any precautions whatsoever. And so it makes no sense to me to have open meetings, unmasked, who's vaccinated, staff vaccinated. Does anyone know these things? No. So I think it's not responsible to have, let's have the booze and let's have the fun, but let's take no precautions and let's have no requirements. And I think that's, I don't think that's a responsible position for us to do. And as I said, I would amend the motion. So have it, grant a liquor license with the provisions that attendees need to have vaccination proof, and staff who are serving need to have vaccination proof. That would be my amendment to this motion.
Okay, is there a second to Steve's amendment?
I'll second the amendment.
Okay, any further discussion on the amended motion?
I appreciate the sentiment, Steve. I don't know if this is the place to take the stand for something that's happening tomorrow. Generally, I'm in favor of whatever we can to encourage folks, but I don't want to, I don't know if we need to do it tomorrow for an event. And I may eat my words here, but I don't know if we have to worry about Omicron in town tomorrow. I know it's coming. It may already be here. But I don't want to throw the rain in the parade for an event this close to it happening.
Mary Beth Bergeron is in our observance. I don't know if somebody wants to maybe ask Josh's question to her, but she's in the other room, as they say.
Bring her in.
I just moved Mary Beth in.
Okay. I'd like to comment before Mary Beth makes her statement, because I know that she'll support this, but I also think that when we look at trying to govern, a large organization like a town, we have to respect the abilities of the components. And so, if the adult center has discussed this, and I'm sure the issue of COVID has come up, and they decided to move forward on this. And I think giving short notice for us to sort of step in and make a requirement that's going to interfere with their planning is something I'd question also. I think I'd stick with Josh's opinion that, the health department hasn't made a decision. And so, it's nice. It's a nice thought, and I don't want people to get COVID, obviously, but I don't think it's a recommendation that, as a select board, that we should jump into. So I guess I'd support that idea.
Mary Beth, would you like to participate?
Sure, I'll be glad to. Can you hear me, Mark?
Yep.
Okay. Well, first of all, I think I need to give you a little background on this. Last Thursday, there was a concert held on Thursday afternoon, and it was sold out. It was the MOSA group. I don't know if you're familiar with them. There's a small group of string instrumentalists that played with the symphony, which is obviously no longer performing down at Springfield City. And so as a result, we had, I won't say oversold, we very quickly came to our limit as to the number of people that could comfortably and with some social distancing fit in the multi-purpose room. And LACCF was sponsoring that particular event. And yes, we did serve liquor. No, that event we did not serve liquor at because it was an afternoon event. The event coordinator, the assistant director, spoke to the leader of MOSA, and they agreed that they would hold an evening event of approximately the same amount of people tomorrow night, and which is why the late submission for the liquor license. I can tell you we have not oversold, that also now has a waiting list on it. Clearly there is a strong desire within our community and surrounding communities for that type of cultural event. And so I think that, the decision to proceed with holding that event tomorrow night was certainly wise, and particularly given the holiday season. They have 127 people expected tomorrow night, and they have a wait list. Now, 127 people signed up. Clearly, not all of those are going to show. I can tell you last Thursday, there was not one person in that room that did not have a mask on. They are in the front door of the adult center. It says masks are strongly recommended. I will say there are some card groups that are meeting. These are all people who are sitting at a small table. They know each other. They played cards together for years. You're also talking about adults, older adults, who are all very careful. I should say all very careful, but the preponderance of people attending any event at the adult center are people who are pretty wise. They didn't live this long without having some intelligence. And as a result, when it's crowded, they're masked. When it's people they know and they're sitting playing cards with three other people, no, they don't have their masks on. Or obviously at lunch, they don't have their masks on. But that is a choice that they're making as they come in, although it is posted on the front door that the masks are recommended. So I don't know if that gives you a quick background on what's happening tomorrow night, but it should be a great concert because the one on Thursday afternoon was.
Mary Beth, why did you feel the need to have a liquor license for this event when you didn't have one for the other event?
Well, the other one was in the afternoon, Mark. And that one we served desserts.
Does the application say 15 people?
It says 75.
At that time, we didn't think that it would be filled.
Well, I
75.
saw you a slash on the 7 on your address, and then I assumed that was 15. If we're talking 100 plus people, that does sway me a bit. I thought it was going to be much smaller.
No. And I will tell you, probably about half of them will have a glass of wine. Maybe half of them will have a glass of wine. The others don't participate. Although they do participate in the cheese and crackers and water, because we do serve water also. And I think I just need to emphasize, these are adult, intelligent people that are going out for a concert. About half of them probably will have a glass of wine while they're watching the concert. I mean, and it's like a 6-ounce glass of wine. It's not 9 or 12 ounces.
So you would say that the liquor license, the liquor is modestly to largely irrelevant to the event.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So if the liquor license was not approved, you would expect a very small, if any, drop off in attendance.
I don't think anyone would not come, to be honest with you. It's a hosting thing. It's a courtesy.
So our vote tonight isn't really going to affect the event. It's going to continue to happen. And the numbers.
Oh, yes. Sure. Absolutely.
So this is just.
But I will say that people are expecting that. But, we didn't serve it. We didn't serve it.
So it's a hospitality sort of.
It is a hospitality thing, yes.
So.
Anything else for Mary Beth? So the motion on the table right now is to approve the liquor license contingent upon proof of vaccination of all attendees and staff. Is there anybody else who wants to speak to that motion?
Would that even be feasible?
Go ahead, Josh.
Would that be feasible with the staffing and even to check?
That I don't know. I'm voting against it, so it doesn't really matter to me.
I'll pop in there. It would be very problematic. I will say that with staffing. I mean, there's one staff person that's going to be there tomorrow night. Other than that, it'll be volunteers. It would be very problematic to implement that.
It sounds like if this passes, you're just not going to serve liquor.
I'm sorry?
It would sound like if this motion were to pass the select board, you'd choose not to serve the liquor rather than to require masking of everybody or proof of vaccination of everybody and servers.
Well, my hope would be is that you would approve both. Or you would approve, not approve the amendment, but approve the motion on the floor to allow us to serve it. That would be my hope, but obviously it's your decision.
I guess the last question is, you had this event on last Thursday and today Monday, and were there any reports of anyone getting COVID or getting sick as a
None.
Based on the event? None.
No.
Okay.
No.
Thank you.
Okay, again, the motion that's excuse me on the floor is to allow the one-day liquor license contingent upon proof of vaccination for all attendees and staff. Does anybody else want to speak to that motion? Okay, Mike, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Strange?
No.
Mr. Morantz?
Yes.
Mr. Levine?
No.
Mr. Gold?
Yes.
Mr. Lacusa?
No.
Tom with a big vote.
Well, I thought you didn't hear me, no?
Yeah, no, I heard you. Okay, so the motion is defeated. Now we go back to the original motion, which was Mark's motion to approve the one-day liquor license. I'm pretty sure that was already seconded as well, although I can't remember who seconded it. Does anybody have anything they want to say about that motion? Okay, Mike, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Strange,
Yes.
Mr. Morantz,
No.
Mr. Levine,
Yes.
Mr. Gold,
Yes.
Mr. Lacusa,
Yes.
Thank everybody. Last but not least, our special request for a library and planter box on Green Meadow Drive.
all right, I'm moving in John now, who submitted the application.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Hi, my name is John Moseychuk. I'm a resident of Green Meadow Drive, and we have submitted this petition to install two items on the little circle on Green Meadow Drive, the end of Green Meadow Drive. If you're not familiar with the street, we're right off of the town green, and it's kind of like a half cul-de-sac, half dead-end drive, where at the very eastern side of the street, there's a little loop basically, and there's maybe a 50-foot circumference circle that is grass with a few small shrubs and trees in there right now. And anyway, we just like to beautify that a little bit by installing the planter box and the little library, the details of which I submitted to Mike, and hopefully you guys are able to see. In support of this, I also have letters from I think it's 5 or 6 of us who are immediately adjacent to this little circle, all of whom are in support of this. I will note, however, that one of the neighbors is in the process of moving. And so one of the houses there, while they might see this for some short period of time, they might not, they're really not the party who would see this for years to come. But anyway, this is mostly for the kids on our street. There's a few little libraries around town, behind the adult center on Maple. There's one in Laurel Park. There's a few just on private properties around town. But the idea is that you take a book, leave a book, that sort of thing. The planter box we have tried as a street unsuccessfully to put some wildflowers just in the dirt there, but with chipmunks and rabbits and deer, they are eaten fairly quickly. So this would just kind of raise them up, a foot or two, so that some flowers could grow.
And so, who will be maintaining the planter box?
That would be me. Obviously anyone is welcome on the street to join. But I've made these before. I have one that's ready to go. It's just 2x4s. It's pressure treated wood, so it shouldn't rot. I've also stained it, I think, with 2 or 3 layers of stain, so it's additionally, weather resistant. The wood is pressure treated, is ground contact pressure treated. So to the extent that it gets wet or something like that, it's pretty resistant to the weather.
Thank you. Yeah, Mark.
John, I apologize. I may have missed this. Where did you say this was going to go on Green Meadow Drive? I just pulled up a map.
Sure. Yeah. So Green Meadow Drive runs east-west away from the town green. Right. At the very eastern side of Green Meadow Drive, kind of towards the dead end. Again, I'd say it's half a cul-de-sac, half a dead end, because the street technically continues past the circle just for one person's driveway. But there's I don't want to say green because it's not really green. There's an area.
There's a circle there. Right.
Yeah, exactly. That has basically dirt and some weeds in it right now.
So who maintains that circle? Who rakes it, or who does? Nobody. You do.
But you're looking at them, unfortunately.
Okay.
I think the town DPW is supposed to come by every so often. They don't, at least not on a consistent schedule. Because I'm the youngest one around the circle there, I kind of have been chosen as the grass guy. So it doesn't take me long to maintain it or to cut it, but I think the town does come, but not enough to keep the weeds from making it look worse than it actually is.
So your proposal is to put this in that in somewhere.
Yeah, but that it wouldn't change necessitating needing to mow the grass there. To mow.
No, I was just trying to figure out where it was. That's fine.
Yeah, no, in that little circle there, it's about. I don't know. I haven't taken a tape measure to it, but I'm guessing it's a 50-foot circumference.
Right.
Radius. Okay. Radius. 100-foot diameter maybe circle.
Yeah, Josh.
I think it's a really nice idea. I wonder, have you run it by DPW to get their sign off on it? I know that they're not taking care of it, but in theory, if you stop maintaining it, you moved away, nobody want to touch it. It would be DPW would either have to maintain it or take it down. So have you run it by them?
I started there first, actually, and they referred me to the select board. So I'm not sure what their position is one way or the other. But I did start there. That was my first call a couple months ago, and they referred me to you.
Mark, my only concern is that the snowplows get it, but that's not that's not a concern I need to be worried about. But as far as I'm concerned, it's a great idea. But just watch out for the snowplows because the town tends to use those circles to just, especially in what you say calls a cul-de-sac, to just pile up the snow there. So beware. That's all.
Yes, there is, and so I don't have the precise spot that I would put this down, and I would want to talk to somebody at DPW before I actually did that. But there is, you're correct, and maybe the first 5 feet or so to the curb does get inundated with snow in the wintertime, and so to the extent that that we did put something there, it would be more towards the center of it, so that just regular snow would fall on it, and not the the tremendous amounts that the snowplows can put forth there.
Mark, I'll make a motion that we approve this request.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? Mike, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Strange?
Yes.
Mr. Morantz?
Yes.
Mr. Levine?
Yes.
Mr. Gold?
Yes.
Mr. Lacusa?
Yes.
Thanks, John. Good luck.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, have a good night. All right. Anybody have anything else they want to add for the evening?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Yeah, you would. Second?
Second.
Well, good.
Mike, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Strange?
Yes.
Mr. Morantz?
Yes.
Mr. Levine?
Yes.
Mr. Gold?
Yes.
And Mr. Lacusa?
Yes.
Very good. Happy holidays to each and every one of you. We'll see you after the new year.
Thank you. You as well.
Happy holidays.
Good.
Bye-bye. Stay safe out there.